Hello, 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 friends. I am back for another reading. Today is October 1st, so we are moving into some new energy in this last portion of 2025. This is a timeless reading, so whenever you find it is exactly when it is meant to find you. This one's going to be a really interesting one. So I was having a lot of stuff come through already in terms of sort of how to structure this reading and how to structure things, but we'll see how these energies come through to be interpreted. So I'm just going to cleanse this space and the decks, take a few deep breaths to connect in while we're doing this. So today I'm going to be using my very first tarot deck that I ever got. It was gifted to me when I was 13, I believe. It's called the Unicorn Tarot deck, and it's a fun one. And then I'm also going to be tapping into the Aquarian Tarot, which is also a beautiful deck. And as always, my Sacred Woundings Oracle deck, which I'll use to sort of guide the energy. So today I'm going to be splitting this into masculine and feminine energies. We are going to be looking at the relationship between the masculine and feminine, and how the distorted masculine and feminine energies are sort of creating a rift or a distortion within the heart space. So first I'm going to get a Sacred Woundings card for the masculine energy, please. Okay, so two of these came out for the masculine energy, which I'll put over here. So we're looking at inner child wounds and past life wounds. So I think, again, an extension of what we've been tapping into in terms of the ancestral trauma, and definitely in line with what I've been tapping into as well. So I'll get more into that in a minute. And so I'll also get some a card for the feminine energy, please. All right. So what's coming up? Okay. All right. So these two, again, really tie into each other. So these two are codependency wounds and external validation. And that's actually really interesting that those are coming up on the codependency makes sense, but the external validation, to me, has always felt more of a sort of a physical world, material world, masculine wound. But that's interesting. We'll see how that shows up. So I think today I'm going to pull all the cards before we really start getting into it. So I'm going to be using the Aquarian Tarot for the masculine energy. Any messages that are tied to this masculine energy that is coming up to be addressed, please and thank you. Okay. And there is the Ace of Pentacles at the bottom of the deck here. I'm going to be using this Unicorn Tarot for the feminine side of the energy. And that's interesting that it fell right on top of the masculine cards there. Not sure if there's anything else that would like to come out. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So we do have the Wheel of Fortune at the bottom of the deck there, which may or may not be relevant. Okay. So what fell specifically onto the masculine energy was the Three of Swords, the Nine of Rods, and the Eight of Cups. So these ones seem to be more connected to this masculine distortion. So I will sort of leave these three connected here. And that is really interesting because the Nine of Rods came out for both the masculine and for the feminine energy as well. And like I said, these are really coming out in the shared space. And I'll get more into what I mean by that. But there is a lot of overlap. So here we also have the Three of Rods and the Three of Rods as well. And is there anything else? So there's a lot of rods coming up. Yeah, especially in the feminine space. All right, sorry, I just took a brief pause to tap into, so I've said it in previous readings, but I really do like to tap into the specific booklets because they're all slightly different in the way that they interpret the energies of the cards. And because each deck has a slightly different energy, I do like to tap into what is specifically being expressed or what really stands out to me in these particular booklets. So I started in with the Three of Rods, and this one is in reverse in the masculine energy. And I wasn't sure if I was going to take it reversed or not, but this really seems to make sense in the context of what we're looking at here and the messages that I've been receiving already. So the Three of Rods upright is about fruitful collaboration, ingenuity, effort, which are the words that are standing out to me here. And then we also have in reverse, help offered, not reliable. So that's really standing out to me in the way that this comes up within the masculine energy. And then we also have the Nine of Rods, which is really interesting because it's all about inner strength crystallized by opposition. And that's a really fascinating thing as well, because when we're looking into the opposing energies, the ways in which these energies collaborate together, right? The masculine and the feminine energy space, they're all within us, right? They're all within us. And they also express themselves in masculine and feminine energies in different spaces, right? But I'm a firm believer in the fact that we all carry masculine and feminine energy inside of us. And so this is more looking at the ways in which our internal masculine and feminine energies are working and responding to one another, and as well as the collective masculine and feminine energies. So when I'm talking about the feminine energies, I'm generally speaking about the non-physical. And we can look at the feminine energies in a lot of different ways, but it really is energy that is not physical. So oftentimes we can look at it as emotional energy and spiritual energy. And that again is a sort of an oversimplified explanation. But for this purpose, I think that will be sort of where we're tapping into. So this is all sort of the non-physical energy, the imagination, the creative energy, the non-physical energy, the emotion, the spiritual devotion, all of that, right? All of the unseen. Sorry, I just had to grab my water here. And so then the masculine energy is more going to be speaking about the physical realm, the material realm, the action space, the ways in which we take and apply that non-physical energy onto the physical, into the material world, how we manifest, right? And so these energies, of course, are always collaborating. They're always working together in the way that we are in creative relationship on this plane of existence and all throughout the universe, but it appears differently within this realm, right? So first I'm going to tap back into this masculine space, and we're going to tap first into the inner child wounds. And these are specifically the inner child wounds within the material plane. But it's always very interesting because of the way that we're exploring the relationship between these energies today and how the distortions are impacting the flow of energy between the two spaces, right? So this one is talking about unresolved emotional pain, unmet needs, sense of unlovability from childhood experiences. It may manifest, so this is talking about the masculine plane, as self-sabotage, difficulty trusting others, fear of abandonment, or a deep longing for validation and care that was never fully received. And so again, there's a mirroring, right? This is talking about validation, and this is how it shows up in the energetic space. The overemphasis on external validation, deep longing for validation that is never quite fully received through this wound here. And I'm actually going to go right into this side because I'm seeing how this card specifically is linked to this masculine space, right? So this is going to be talking primarily about how it's showing up, the manifestation of it. So it's constantly seeking approval or recognition from others, often at the expense of self-worth. It may manifest as feelings of insecurity, anxiety, or emptiness when external praise or acceptance is lacking. So those two are really feeling tied to me. And then we'll tap into the second space here, the past life wounds. So this says, will show up as inexplicable fears, phobias, or recurring patterns that seem to have no logical explanation in your current life. They may manifest as unresolved emotions, relationship struggles, or unexplained trauma that feel like echoes from another time, influencing your present experiences and choices. And then we'll tap into how that is related to this codependency that's coming up, because I do believe that these are also mirroring one another. And look at that, this mirroring on the card here, how these masculine and feminine energies are inexplicably tied, right? And how they are bound together, and how when we're unraveling these wounds, we have to look at them from all sides and not just from one or the other, or we can risk perpetuating the distortions that are causing the wounds in the first place, right? So this is talking about relying excessively on others for validation and emotional support, often neglecting your own needs. It may involve difficulty setting boundaries and feeling unworthy of love unless you're constantly giving to others, rooted in past neglect or enmeshment. All right, so I just wanted to tap into the bottom energy deck of each of these decks. And it's interesting too that they're mirroring. So she's holding this single pentacle. She's holding this single pentacle here that is showing right here. So this is sort of what is going to be manifested through the clearing of these wounds, right? And so they're both talking about bliss and contentment, and they're talking about success, sudden change, a shift in the patterns or the experiences that we're receiving into something better, something different. So a manifestation of this contentment in the physical world experience here. So what we're seeing here is this Queen of Pentacles. And again, it's very interesting. This single pentacle is showing up again. And this the pentacles are really all about the material space. They're all about the physical world, the representation of this physical space, the material wealth. And so that's really interesting that we're seeing these so frequently show up in these energies, right? And so this is talking about needing to feel worthy is what it feels like to me. So in this particular deck, what she's talking about is a wise, trustworthy woman and a counselor. And this to me is showing up as this codependency. So instead of that being a manifestation of the truth, I think this is needing to be seen in this way. In this, I've got all my shit together, I've got everything going on, I can help everyone and everything, I can counsel everyone, I know exactly what's going on, right? And so what we're doing here with this is a reassessment, is what it's talking about in this card. It's a reassessment of priorities, a reassessment of deciding what is best or what is really holding us back. And it says a reassessment of associations. And I think it's a reassessment of all of these ways in which our relationships might be built on this codependency, this need to be a fixer, a healer, a counselor, in order to receive this external validation from the real world. But in that, what we're doing is we're risking taking on burdens that are not ours, overburdening ourselves, an over responsibility of taking on what isn't ours in order to receive validation. And this is saying constantly giving to others based on past neglect or enmeshment, which is also, again, tying into this inner child wound, right? Codependency often stems from enmeshment in childhood, unhealthy boundaries in our childhood relationships, needing to be parentified, needing to be being relied upon in a way that is not healthy or conducive to the developmental stage that a child is in, right? So being parentified in a way that then leads to this inner child burden, right? The feeling of being unlovable unless we are self-sacrificing, right? The only way that we can receive self-validation and validation from others is when we are self-sacrificing, right? And when we're taking on all of these burdens for everyone else at the expense of ourselves. And that is blocking how we're able to shift this. And so by becoming aware of the ways in which these show up in our relationship dynamics, right? And being willing to say, where am I overgiving? And where am I feeling the need to take on more than I am capable of taking on, so that I don't lose my validation, so that I don't lose my experience of feeling loved and connected and safe. And I think this can also show up in romantic relationships as well. And I am a firm believer in everyone carrying all of these energies. I am, an LGBTQ affirming space, a trans affirming space. I am pro any type of consensual relationship style. So I'm not going to feed too much into this really heteronormative space of masculine and feminine or male and female romantic relationships, but it can show up in all sorts of ways even in our relationship with God, in terms of our inner and outer relationship, right? It can show up as, what am I feeling like I need to take on, and what is my masculine energy berating my feminine energy to take on in order to feel lovable, right? How is my masculine energy being abusive to my feminine energy, and how is my feminine energy asking my actions to take on more than I am capable of taking on? So I really want to tap into, again, this Nine of Rods space because of the way that they came up together. So this was coming up in the feminine space and this was coming up in the masculine space, but they're both the same card, so it's quite interesting. I'm going to tap more into that. So I'm going to go back into this deck again because I find it really just so interesting, the ways there's subtle differences in the ways that the decks and the guidebooks interpret the energies of these cards. And I just really find it super useful to be able to tap into exactly what the meaning of this particular deck's energy is calling to me. So this is all about patience and needing to remain calm. It also is talking about insecurity and ostracism. So when we're talking about insecurity, it again seems to show up. This is talking about feelings of insecurity here. When we're over relying on external validation, right? When we're seeking something outside of ourselves, this emotional energy, this need for external validation will drive. This directly feeds our action space, right? It feeds our action space, and it requires us to overgive in the material world, right? To overextend ourselves in the material world. And that can be really uncomfortable, right? So what was coming up, and I think this is a good place to tie it in, is where these energies are, these distortions in the masculine and feminine energy space. So I'm looking at these wounds as feeding distortions. And the distortions are basically a fear response. They're a trauma response. And the trauma response is coming from these wounds. So the distortion feeds fear, which is a root chakra energy. It feeds fear. And that fear, when we allow that fear energy to drive our emotions, and when we allow that fear to drive our physical responses, the way that we show up in the material world, what we're doing is we're creating friction between the masculine and the feminine energy space. We're creating a lack of trust. And so what happens is then, instead of having our hearts open to each other, allowing that free flow of energy, because the heart is that middle space. If you look at sort of the chakra system as being the flow of energy within the physical body as well as within the non-physical body, we have the lower chakras, which are all about the material world. We have the root chakra, which is about safety, stability, comfort. We have the sacral chakra, which is the root of our sexual and creative energy. And then we have the solar plexus chakra, which is all about our confidence, our ability to carry things out, the seat of our power. Is our solar plexus, and that's all connected to the material world. And then we have the heart, which is the bridge. The heart is the bridge between these two spaces. And then in the upper space, we have the throat chakra, which is all about, I saw somebody tie in the throat chakra to the nervous system, which I really enjoyed. I really quite enjoyed that, because it is more like, so it's all about how we speak, the vibrations that we emit through our energy, and especially through our vocal cords, right? Our vocal presence. So that is specifically a non-physical energy, but it is directly tied to seat of our power, which is our solar plexus. So if you sort of look at the solar plexus and the throat chakra as being bridged together in a way through the heart space, the sacral chakra and the third eye chakra, which is what I was going to get to next. The third eye chakra is the seat of our spiritual sight, our intuition, our extrasensory perception, which to me, I think is just all about the way that our body is interpreting subtle energies. So most of the universe is unseen energy, right? I think they say it, and I'm not a scientist, so don't quote me on this, but I think it's only around 3% of what they say exists in the universe is physical matter, material, right? And the rest is non-physical. And right now, the way that our science interprets it is empty space a lot of the time, or just unknown space. But there's so much that's non-physical that we are receiving and responding to at all times. And that's what our third eye chakra and our crown chakra, which is the top, which is directly connected to the root, are receiving information. So anyways, what I was trying to get into is the ways in which these fear energies can directly impact our heart space. And so instead of being in a state of trust, instead of being in a state of willingness, instead of being in a state of love and harmony and balance and receptivity and open energy flow between the lower and upper chakras, or the masculine and feminine energy spaces, including in the material world, in the way that we interact and engage with our emotions, and in the way that we engage with our physical and material world. This comes up oftentimes in late stage capitalism as overworking, as a form of external validation, and as a form of escapism from our emotional states. Excuse me, I'm getting thirsty channeling all this energy. All right, so what this is really talking about is what we can do to heal the distortions. And these are coming up as the distorted energies that impact the way that the feminine and masculine energies can receive one another, right? Or have the ability to open up and receive one another. So these often will lead to a lack of trust, a lack of self-trust, and a lack of trust in between people, in between spaces, because we're operating out of fear instead of operating out of a sense of trust and fundamental feeling of felt safety in the body, and in the emotional spaces. All right, so now I'm gonna move these because these are the next feminine energies that we're really tapping into, but they were, remember, underneath they fell directly on the masculine space. So these are sort of focusing on where the feminine energy is feeling directly impacted by the masculine distortions, these distortions that are coming up right here, and the way that the masculine energy is responding to these distortions within the feminine space. So these impact the way that the masculine energy shows up in the real world, and these impact the way that the feminine energy shows up in the non-physical world. And so they're both talking about how we're feeling these distortions and how they impact us and how they continue to perpetuate these wounds and distortions, as opposed to how they perpetuate healthy, harmonized relational dynamics between the masculine and feminine energy space. And so these are sort of both talking about loneliness and heartbreak, and how when we speak into codependency and the need for external validation in terms of self-sacrificing, that can often be how we see these things show up in our relationship spaces as well, right? And especially the relationship spaces under patriarchy. So we can't ignore the ways in which these distorted energies show up because of the ways that we are operating in systems, right? And the systems and structures that have created these wounds and perpetuated these wounds through lifetimes, not just through this lifetime, but through past lives. And so these are talking about how when we show up in relationship, and we show up in relationship as overgiving, enmeshment, and an over-reliance on external validation, as opposed to at the expense of self-worth. So when we're willing to receive almost anything and do almost anything and take on almost any burden to avoid feeling this lack of external validation, to avoid feeling this heartbreak and this loneliness. But in doing so, what we're doing is we're actually perpetuating those feelings that we don't want to experience. The feeling of heartbreak and loneliness, because we are neglecting ourselves, right? And so when we're neglecting ourselves, sometimes it can feel like it's coming up, the neglect is coming up from the relationships around us. But why are we relying so heavily on this validation? Why are we relying so heavily on these external relationship dynamics, these external energies, making sure that we're proving that we're perfect, that we're, taking on everyone's burdens, counseling everyone, being available to everyone, and not at all thinking about what we deserve, what we need, what we need to experience from ourselves. And so these end up showing up in the way that we act. And so what we're doing is we're actually wounding ourselves through our own actions. And then we perpetuate the cycle, right? We perpetuate the cycle. So we need to be really clear on where these are coming from. And some of these, right, are coming from past lives. But when we work through these energies, what we're going to see is a balancing out in the material world, a balancing out of the way in which these energies relate to one another. We're going to see a shift in healthy relationship spaces. And that means relationships between us and ourselves, our own internal and masculine energy and our internal feminine energy. We're going to see healthier work-life balance. We're going to see healthier interpersonal relationships, friendships. We're also going to see healthier workspace relationships. We're going to see healthier relationships with our governments, with corporation and worker, like all of these things, right? They're all so connected. When they're not going to be based on exploitation of these different energetic spaces. All right, hello. So now I'm going to be tapping into an energetic clearing and an energetic healing. So I got called to speak a little bit on the quantum body, and that is generally the way that I'm doing my healing. So I like to think about our quantum body as being outside of time, space, and it also encompasses the masculine and feminine energy across all potentials, all dimensions. So I essentially like to look at it as like the body of God. The quantum field is God energy, source energy. And so when we're tapping into that, because I like to view us, each individual being, as basically a fragment or a fractal of this God source energy, right? And so as we look at ourselves as being directly connected and a direct reflection of the Creator, then as we go in and we tune into this quantum field that exists outside of time or space, which is just a dimension, it basically houses all potential. And so then it also houses all past, present, future lifetimes, all parallel lifetimes, all potential timelines, all of everything, essentially, right? So when we're tapping into that, we can also go through and do work within the lineage, ancestral lines. We can go through and do healing for everything, for the collective, for everything else, because we're all connected, right? And so as we tap more into that connected field of potential that we're all directly related to, that we all come from, and that we will all return back to, it really allows us to access a level of healing that when we're just healing for ourselves in this particular human vessel form that we have in this particular lifetime, we're not really tapping into the full potential that we have to heal for the collective and for the original source energy, right? The source code. So we're essentially rewriting that source code by tapping into these wounds and addressing them at the root, at the source, where they come from, so that it can ripple backwards and forwards through the collective fabric of space-time, through all of these different iterations and fractals of our God self, our creative self, all of that. So to me, it just makes sense to approach healing from that space, because we are already directly connected to that infinite field, right? That infinite field of possibility. That was funny. I hit this bowl, but this this bowl is attuned to the heart space, the heart chakra. So that's always really funny, because I like to see that the heart as a portal to that quantum space, that quantum body, that field that's outside of space-time, right? And so that quantum body is always directly going to be feeding into our own health, our collective health, the health and well-being of everything, right? Because we are all an ecosystem. We are all directly related to and connected to and existing in a space of constant communication with everything else that has ever or will ever exist. And that's really cool and really beautiful. So it doesn't have to resonate for you. If it doesn't feel right to you, you don't have to receive this healing. You can click off this video. But if you are open to it, basically I am just going to be using the heart space as a way to basically connect to the part of you that is rooted outside of space-time, outside of this linear experience, outside of this physical incarnation. So then we can also tap into your our collective like this lifetime, all past lifetimes, all future lifetimes, all aspects of self, all aspects of other people. It sort of encompasses everything. So to me, it just feels very relevant and very useful. So if that does feel good to you, just sort of sit with the intention to receive. And I'll get you to start taking some breaths. You don't have to change your breathing, just become more sort of conscious of breathing into the heart space. And just attuning to the body, attuning to the breath. There's nothing wrong with how you're breathing. You don't need to change it. You don't need to access anything different than what you're already accessing. Just attune to it and become present, become more aware of where you are existing, the part of you that's existing outside of this reality. The part of you that's eternal. Now I'm lighting some desert sage that was gifted to me a couple years ago. Sometimes a pain in the ass to light. But it's a very specific and a very beautiful energy, so sometimes it's just the ideal medicine for the space. holy water. I'm just going to use this shell to comb through your auric field. Now we're going to clean up some of the energy Removing anything stagnant. Removing any debris from the heart space. I'm just going to finalize this clearing by using this selenite. Cleaning in all directions. And for all of you crystal heads out here, this is actually satin spar, not selenite, but most of us know it as selenite. It's a type of gypsum that is used for its cleansing properties, but yeah, it's always so fascinating how these terminologies sort of get thrown around. I do have a piece of true selenite. It's not accessible right now, but anyways, I love the energy of satin spar. So I guess I should be being more technically correct with how I refer to it. All right, I think we're pretty much done. Take a few deep breaths with the intention of grounding this healing into your physical reality. Connecting to the source within you that is connected to the true divine spark, the eternal part of self. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. Catch you next time.